I'd never even met someone with Tourette's, let alone heard of like adult-onset Tourette's. It's wild. It can be physical or mental damage to your brain. I kind of blacked out and I had a seizure completely randomly, no idea what caused it. I said ouch, and then I said ouch again. And it was so odd because I could feel my throat move, but it was like I was hearing somebody else. That turned out to be the first of many, many vocal tics. Mentally, I was absolutely not the same person I was before.
Nobody was talking about Tourette's.
Was not mentioned at all. Nothing.
Today we're speaking with Luke Manton, entrepreneur, proud dad, and neurodiversity advocate whose life changed overnight when he was diagnosed with Tourette's in 2019. It was a diagnosis that forced him to rethink everything he thought he knew about himself. Since then, he's launched and grown Manton Executives, a thriving virtual assistant agency, become a leading voice for neurodivergent inclusion, and adopted a baby boy with his husband, George. He's here to talk about all of it. The challenges, the dark humour, the deep joy, and why difference doesn't need fixing. Just a heads up, this episode touched on some difficult topics such as mental health and suicide. And also there is some strong language that is both explicit and adult in nature. These are involuntary aspects of Luke's Tourette's. Let's get into it. Let's see how great minds think differently. Luke, take me back to 2018 and paint me a picture of what was going on.
I had a really rough background, like council estate, abusive dad, like that kind of thing. I was like absolutely determined to get a decent paying job, have a decent career. I wanted a bit more, and I felt like by 2018 I'd kind of worked my way up to things to do it. So I was, fuck off balls. I was managing a dental practice and it worked out. And then a few months later I was then head of marketing. I still had both of my practices, and then I had this head of marketing role. So I had three people's roles, one person's salary. I had a nice house. I'd been with George for a while, and yeah, I was just living a normal life, going to
mentally, mental health.
Absolutely fine. Our friendship group's very small, but I would always be the one with fuck off balls, the quick one-liner or the sassy comment or the one to make everyone laugh. Fuck you. Until I'd started getting like headaches, and I had headaches frequently. And a lot of people would be like, oh, I think you're working too hard. It's down to stress. But I did that typical thing of like, I'll just ignore it. It'll get better. So it'll be fine. Maybe I haven't had enough coffee. I remember thinking that at one point. So I'm like, oh, I'll just heal it with the Starbucks. But it didn't. It got worse. And over the space of a couple of weeks, I was then waking up and almost every day having a nosebleed. And thinking back on it now, I would have slapped myself. I was like, what are you doing? Because I was still like, it's fine. Like, I'm fine. Like, this is just normal. I think I had nosebleeds as a kid. Like, it was okay. And it just got steadily worse. And I think the final day where it got really bad, I woke up well before my alarm and I was absolutely soaked. And I remember thinking like, I can't have like sweat this much. And I pressed my phone light on and turned my lamp on, and I was absolutely like covered in blood. So I'd had a nosebleed. Yeah.
Wow.
And I genuinely don't know how I was still conscious. There was that amount of blood there, or how I didn't wake up before. But I was absolutely covered in it. And still, even though my bedroom looked like a murder scene, I was like, right, I'll shower, go to work. It'll be fine. I was at work that day and my head was absolutely pounding. And I remember thinking like, I'm going to have to give in. I'm going to have to go home and lie down. I genuinely don't know how I drove myself home. Like, I still don't remember the drive. But I got in the house, George was there, and the last thing I remember was he said that I looked awful, and that is the last thing I remember. So from then, from everything that's been recounted to me from him, I kind of blacked out and I had a seizure completely randomly after waking up in hospital. Still no idea what had caused it, but I remember going to say something to George and I couldn't talk. But I also was thinking, like, I thought I had something on my neck, like something moving me, because I couldn't keep my head still. My head was kind of like, like flicking
rolling
back and
about.
forth. Yeah, like just constant nodding. And I thought at first someone was like doing it. Like I thought, are they testing my like neck? I was so dazed and so out of it. I couldn't get any words out at all, more like just sounds. And it was absolutely terrifying. But from then on, that was kind of like it. And I didn't get any answers initially as to like what it could have been, what caused it, what it was. Eventually, it turns out it was like the seizure had caused swelling and damage to my brain, and the extent of what had happened, fuck off, just wasn't known. And I remember thinking, like, it being asked, like, what caused the seizure? And they were like, we honestly have no idea. And it just could have been stress. But I remember being so frustrated at the time because I was like, I was busy, but I wasn't stressed. Everyone else was stressed for me, but I was fine.
Do you think you've always got to be fine, though? Is that a pattern of you? Yeah. Like, people who are listening obviously won't be able to see you, but I'm on the edge of my seat listening to this story about something really traumatic happening. And you're saying terrible things, but you're smiling and looking at me as if you're saying happy things.
I'm so empathetic towards other people, and I know that when they're sad, it makes me feel sad. So when I'm sad, I don't like, it's so odd. It's almost like a catch-22. I probably do play it like I'm fine all the time. Even back then, before this, I was the same. And I think probably for that reason, like I remember George asking me, do you still have a headache? And my head was absolutely pounding. I was like, no, I feel fine today. And I'm thinking like, I feel like shit, if I'm honest.
So you left hospital with not a lot of answers?
No answers whatsoever. Just that there was damage to my brain. They're not sure of the extent. And I would have another brain scan in 6 weeks.
Right.
So that 6-week period as well was terrifying because I couldn't talk, had no idea what had happened.
You couldn't talk?
My voice just did not come back at all. They just weren't sure what was going on. I was put on sort of medication for anxiety, I think, at the time because I was getting so worked up and so panicked. And also they were hoping it would like relax the muscles because this whole time my head would just not stop. Like I was like kind of throwing it up and down and I just couldn't. Like it was almost giving me a headache even more. But that 6 weeks period, I remember thinking like I was going to like die or something. And I was like, they're going to be like, oh, your brain's shutting down. And like every scenario you could think of or imagine, I'd kind of played it over and over in my head.
And were you thinking clearly? Were you lucid? Were you?
Yeah, I was absolutely like fine in that respect. Like I just couldn't get my words out. And if anything, like towards the end of it, where it kind of like 6 weeks doesn't seem a long time, but when it is 24/7, like you kind of fucking hell balls get used to it pretty quickly. So I'd stopped trying to get a word out, and it wasn't until, which weirdly it became the first vocal tic, I was walking along my landing and I caught my elbow on the banister and instantly I was like ow, and then I thought, oh my god, I've just made like a sound, and then I could kind of gradually get my words out, but I had a stammer on every single word and it was so odd, and I almost feel like that was more frustrating than not talking.
Yes.
It was awful. It was almost like a form of like torture because I'd gone from being the one with the witty, quick comebacks and the funny lines, to then like I'm getting looks from people when they're waiting for me to finish a sentence. And from there it kind of got steadily worse. Like the stammer was every word. I'd had the other brain scans, still no answers. They could see the damaged tissue. There was also a growth in my brain that it turns out they said initially was a brain tumour, but had been there since birth as a birth defect. And it's the damaged tissue around it, which could have been like the brain tissue swelling and pressing on something that shouldn't be there. They couldn't give me a set answer. And also they couldn't tell me what was happening to me or why it was happening to me.
Or what was going to happen.
Yeah, or what was going to happen. And I was like terrified. And I thought, am I ever going to talk normally again? And that was it. From then, I was kind of like left to my own devices. And I'd been off work, obviously, for the whole time. And I remember thinking, like, at least I've still got my job to focus on. So I arranged after the results from the second brain scan to go back to work. And I was like, I need to do something. The MD was like, you're not ready to come back. And I was like, I wish everybody would stop telling me what I'm fucking hell piss off, what I'm ready for and what I'm not. I was like, so please just let me come back. It'll be fine. It was not fine. I went back to work. I just thought like, I was embarrassed to talk to people because the stammer, and everyone on my team had been made aware before.
Okay.
Like a load of them, all of them pretty much had reached out to check in, and I like kind of updated them. But I think I saw the shock on their faces when they were seeing it in person, but fuck off for the first time. And it was embarrassing, and I could barely string a sentence together. I still couldn't keep my head still without dosing myself up on like diazepam and other things like that. And I just thought, shit, like this is not this is not the one. So I was like, I'll try and fix something. So I arranged like a speech therapy class, which I ended up doing for 2.5 years, which I'm pretty sure is the reason I can speak fluidly now. And occasionally like the stammer will like trip me up, and I just kind of have to remember the techniques. I think now I'm at the point where I don't have to consciously think about those techniques. I just do them. Yeah. Whereas then it was like, I'd really have to think to get a sentence out. George took me out for dinner and I really didn't want to go, but he was like, you really need to get out of the house. And he said, oh, watch the candle, because I moved my hand to grab the menu. And I said, ouch. And he moved it and he was like, oh, did it touch you? And I was like, oh, no, it didn't. And then I said, ouch again. And it was so odd because I could feel my throat move, but it was like I was hearing somebody else say it.
Wow.
And then that turned out to be the first of many, many vocal tics. And that's just how they started, completely out of the blue. And the reason everybody noticed was because when I ticked, there was no stammer. So it would come out crystal clear and I would sound like I used to sound.
So you were stammering when you were talking.
Yeah.
And when you were ticking,
crystal clear.
No stammer. What would George say if he was sat here and I asked him about this period?
He was petrified the whole time. And he's so like cool and calm about everything. So he's a police officer. He's always been in the police, and he is so like easygoing and laid back. He always seemed like everything was like absolutely fine and it was all under control. Now talking about it, he was absolutely like petrified and like worried so much about me.
And powerless.
Yeah, because he couldn't do anything. And yeah, vocal tics started. I'd spoken to various neurologists and they were like, oh yeah, you just fuck off, piss off, twat. And they're like, oh, you just have to like wait and see what happens, essentially. And they were like, we can do another brain scan, which shows exactly the same as before. But yeah, that was it. The doctor has no idea. And I was just told to carry on with it. So I was doing my own research, and this was when I had a bit of drive to do it because I wanted to figure it out. And
Sorry,
I was kind of like,
and nobody was talking about Tourette's?
Was not mentioned at all. Nothing. So Tourette's first came up when I brought it up to my GP, and so casually she was like, oh yeah, it could be. And then I was like, yeah, but I never had this. I didn't have this as a child. And she was the first person I'd ever heard the term adult-onset Tourette's.
Yeah, so let's talk about adult-onset because until
balls.
meeting and asking you on here, I'd never come across, we've had guests with Tourette's on here before, but we've not talked adult-onset. Tell me what you understand by that, and for listeners who've never heard it too.
So this is essentially adult-onset Tourette's is any form of Tourette's. So whether it's like the whole thing or just like motor tics or coprolalia, echolalia, those kind of things, any aspect of Tourette's that has started after 18. I genuinely had no idea it was a thing. I'd never even met someone with Tourette's, let alone heard of like adult-onset Tourette's before this happened to me. I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know it was possible.
Not in your family, not
absolutely nothing.
You don't look back and go, "Oh, it was there in some way, shape, or form."
Well, so we've had this discussion recently with my mum where she so casually was like, "You did used to do like a few extra blinks as a kid," and she was like, "Would that be a tic?" And I was like, "Jesus Christ, Mum, yes." I was like, "Where was this information like years ago when it would have been beneficial?" Other than that, unless they just didn't notice, like as far as I'm concerned, there was no tics at all before. And
since you've learned obviously about it, is the understanding that does it have to be a traumatic brain injury or a traumatic event?
So
what causes adult onset Tourette's?
It's wild. It can be physical or mental, damage to your brain. So I met someone now as well. I've met so many people with Tourette's. So I've met somebody had broke into her house while she was there at uni, and she'd been attacked while in the house, and that triggered adult onset Tourette's, and she was mid-20s then as well. But I've also met someone who was in a motorbike accident in his late 30s, and that triggered adult onset Tourette's. So it can be both like emotional trauma, like mental trauma, and physical.
Wow. And
But
what
still,
do we know about the science of that?
I wish it was more, but there's genuinely not much. I think the simplest it's been explained to me is the part of your brain where you're like, say, essentially the synapses that will fire off, they will just stretch to the point through like pressure or stress or trauma to like an elastic band until they just snap. And then once it's snapped, there's no going back, and it will essentially just reconnect however it wants. I think they dumbed it down a lot for me because I'm not I'm not into neurology, surprisingly. But yeah, they don't know as much as they want to. It's the same in the same vein of there being such a lack of info around it, because people who stammer and people who have Tourette's, if they sing, it stops.
Yeah.
And they can't figure out why. Like there's not a single scientific reason why, but it is 100% across the board. No matter how bad the tics are, if you sing, it stops every time without fail. People find it wild, but I drive. You can suppress tics. Fuck off, bitch, for a short period of time. So I do that if I feel one coming, but I'll just sing while I drive. I still only drive short distances. I'm not allowed to drive on a motorway, but it gets me to like work and back, and it kind of like I feel like it's just a little like cheat code.
And you sing
for it to get
and you
away.
don't tick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild, and it's the same with absolutely anyone I've met with.
What about humming?
Tourette's. Doesn't work. Try.
Okay. Whistling?
It has to be. So I have whistling as a tick, but weirdly I can't whistle.
What?
I can't whistle. I'd never been able to whistle ever in my life.
But your body knows how to whistle.
Yeah, but I have no idea.
Wow.
And there's other things I do as well, which people find surprising. Like there's a really old insurance company called Lombard Direct.
Yeah.
And I have a tick, and I still can't even think of it now, where I will quote what the phone number was and the jingle from that website. And I don't know how long ago they cancelled that advert or whatever happened to that company. But things like this, and it's almost like it stays in your brain. Your brain's like, for some reason, like, we'll keep hold of this. Like,
yeah.
Because apparently that will be really beneficial in the future.
So your GP says, could be.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
I'd stopped going out by this point because the tics had got so much worse. And I did see them. I almost thought oh, is he faking it? Do you know what I mean? Because none of them had understood that you could get Tourette's as an adult. I didn't have a diagnosis by this point, so I couldn't be like, oh, I've got like adult onset Tourette's. And they'll be like, why don't you just stop doing it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't. And I just became an absolute shell of myself. And then during this period as well, I was so down. My job decided that I shouldn't work there anymore. So you had to have like, I think it's a CPD qualification. And part of that is, it's renewed every year. Part of that is communication within a practice team, because it's technically a medical team.
Yes.
I did it twice and I failed both on communication because of not being able to string a full sentence together. So I failed, so I couldn't do that part of my job. I thought they'd let me keep the marketing thing. And at the time I was so angry. Fucking hell, bollocks. But looking back on it now, they definitely made the right call, because mentally I was absolutely not the same person I was before. Like, I would show up late and someone would be ask me if I'm okay, and I would just completely ignore them, and I was just going to shut myself in my office. Do you know what I mean? It was like that. Or someone would email me like just chasing something up, or like they'd email me like, oh, have you got any ideas on this? And I just reply with no. Like, do you know what I mean? And I was just like,
I find that hard to like just even spending a little bit of time with you now. Yeah, that seems very out of character.
Yeah, and it just wasn't me, but at the time it was, and I felt that's just how I felt. And I thought, I'm so fucking done with all of this. From then I would refuse to leave the house, and I was kind of living on my savings, and George was paying for everything. And then I thought, I suppose I should get a job. I'll find somewhere new. Jesus Christ, trying to interview with tics and a stammer. And looking back, essentially it was a really shitty attitude as well.
Understandable.
It was just no, like relentlessly. And I think each no was just like an extra like stab. And I think it's because as well, like I'd only ever got the jobs that I'd gone for. I'd never interviewed for a job that I hadn't got. So the first one was pretty humbling. Second one, I'm like, oh, third one, I was like, yeah, I was well in like the 30s of interviews and still no after no. And people would treat me like shit. There's no way people would have treated me like that before Tourette's. Absolutely not. People would be willing to listen to what I had to say. They wouldn't stare at me the way they do. Like, I can see them looking at each other. Like, I used to sit there and like inside my head, I'd be screaming like, I am not fucking blind. Do you know what I mean? I think at its worst, I'd interviewed for a job that I thought I was going to get. I did the aptitude test, 4 of them. They emailed me and they said I'd bypassed the first round of interviews and they wanted to invite me for the second. In my head, that was the first glimmer of hope I'd had since the job search.
Yep.
The interview was booked for 90 minutes. And
face to face.
Yeah. So it was me and 4 of their directors. And I was like, that's fine. I've got this. I like used to meet my directors all the time. It was fine. It wasn't until like the day before when George was like, how do they feel about the tics? And I was like, shit. Like,
I don't know.
I didn't tell them and I didn't put it on a single application. I was so invested in what I was writing and what I was doing. There was almost like the old me kind of like took over because I was like, this is the old me's like skill set. And I thought, realistically, like, always on about inclusion, always on about diversity, like it'll be fine. So it's booked for an hour and a half. When I showed up, the receptionist, fucking hell, she was so rude to me, like so rude. When I told her I was here for the interview, she just looked me up and down and she was like, what's wrong with you? She was like, do they know about this? And I think I told her about the tics and things like this. And she was like,
still no Tourette's
diagnosis by this point. And then she asked me if they knew, which I thought was a really odd question because, like, number one, what the fuck is it to do with you? But I was like, oh, I don't think so.
But it's the insinuation, isn't it? Of like, have you told them?
Yeah, and I thought she's talking to me like I'm thick. And it was instantly just wound me up. And I could see that she was looking at me and looking at another receptionist. And like, she definitely like eye rolled at one point. And my tics were getting so much worse because the higher the emotion, whether it's positive or negative, so stress or excitement, it's gonna make your tics worse. So they're getting worse and worse. Eventually she walked me into the interview room. There was a printed pack on the table with my name on it. And she didn't shut the door. And then she spoke over me just as I was getting through my introduction and then told them who I was. I had these tics and that I'd been swearing and things in the waiting room and stuff like that. And I then had to stand there and listen while all of these people had a conversation about me, watching me tick. And then like, oh, would we think this is appropriate? Like, I'm fucking standing right there. Do you know what I mean? And I said nothing. And I kick myself even to this day for not saying anything. Now I would have flipped the bloody table.
Yeah.
But they just spoke amongst themselves. And then eventually just looked up and they were like, oh, we really appreciate you coming in. But unfortunately, we don't think you'd be right for this role. That was the end of my interview. I was in there for 4 minutes. 4 minutes maximum. And then the receptionist walked me out and she was watching me so closely. And I said absolutely nothing. And I got in the car and George had driven me. I got in the car and George asked me how it went. And I don't think I've ever felt as bad as I did in that moment. And I just said to him, I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. And we drove home and that was the night I tried to take my own life because I was like, I can't live like this anymore. Like, I'm so trapped. It's like, I got out of this life of having no money and like living in a shit area. And this has just turned my life upside down. And it's dragging me back towards that place. And I thought, I'm done. Like, I've tried everything. I was applying for jobs for like marketing directors, right down to like cleaners, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a cleaner. I would have been happy to do it, but I still couldn't get the fucking jobs. And I was like, what is so wrong with me? Like, I applied for a job as a fucking bin man and they were still like, I still got a no. And it may not have been anything to do with the Tourette's or whatever. Like, they may think, why the fuck is someone who's like been a marketing director applying to be a bin man? Do you know what I mean? But to me, everything was so raw and so much that it all just fucking hell, piss off. Just felt like a personal attack. So,
and you didn't even know what was going on?
No, still no idea. And I just thought, if this is what it is, like, I don't want it. I'm done. So I tried to take my own life because I thought I don't think I'd ever hated myself that much. And no matter how many people said, "Oh, you're fine," I was sick of people feeling sorry for me. Fuck you, twats. Sick of hating myself and sick of hating how things were and sick of the situation. And it was just everything. I just thought I'm done. Like the rubber band has snapped. Like
Yes, I'm out.
finished. Like carry on without me kind of vibe. Afterwards, seeing the amount of people that I hurt from doing that was definitely what I think was the wake-up call I needed, because I think I got so consumed with hating myself so much that I just thought everybody else hated me as well. Do you know what I mean? When you mentally convince yourself that
I'm totally with you. They'll think it's better. It's better for everybody. Actually,
yeah, and I'm like I'm a hassle. Like everyone's having to worry about me. I'm making people feel bad when I'm just existing.
Yep.
But seeing the impact that had was the wake-up call I needed to just sort things out. I remember taking a few days and I wanted to apologize to everyone, like individually, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't even, George and I never spoke about it to start with. And he was like, if you want to talk about anything, he was like, when you're ready, that's fine. And I was so ashamed of myself. Then I remember having a neurology appointment with a new neurologist. Instantly, he was like, we were going through dates and things, and he was like, it's Tourette's. And I was like, now I have an answer.
Give me the timeline between ending up in hospital in 2018 to then that meeting with your neurologist where he spotted it.
I think probably about 14 months later. 14 to 18 months later. So the diagnosis process for Tourette's is you have to have a certain number of vocal tics and a certain number of motor tics every day for 12 months.
Okay.
That's the diagnosis process, which is, I'm actually working with a charity now, Tourette's Action, to try and have that changed because it's ridiculous.
What do you want it to be?
I think it's so obviously observed over 2 or 3 sessions. Do you know what I mean?
2 or 3 hours.
Yeah. Oh, this person's like ticking relentlessly. There's no other physical markers to suggest, like they've never had any disorders to suggest like pandas or other tick disorders or something like that. Like it's obvious. And I have parents message me through social media now, like, oh, my child's ticked every day for 8.5 months, but we've had a quiet day without any. And they haven't reached these, say, like 3 vocal tics they need for the day. As according to the diagnosis process, you should then start again. Genuinely, it's wild. So I'm like, now just lie. Like if it's a day, cover it up, because otherwise you're waiting. Not that a diagnosis gives you that protection of having, fuck you, twats, bitch, having a diagnosis and a disability. But help-wise, once I had my diagnosis of Tourette's, I was like, what do I do now? And he was like, oh, Google Tourette's Action, the charity. He was like, and have a read of their website. And that's it. And that's still the advice from the NHS, whether you're an adult or a parent of a child with Tourette's, that's still the advice.
Off you go.
Go find out for yourself. But that Tourette's Action, I genuinely owe them like my life, because they had 2 groups a week where you could sign up and do a Zoom call. And that was the first time I ever met anyone else with Tourette's was on one of those Zoom calls. It took so much convincing for George to get me to go to one of these calls.
What was in the way?
It was so new to me, this diagnosis, that I thought I'm going to meet people who have had Tourette's forever and they're going to be like, he's just got it. But there was a call every Tuesday and every Thursday, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. I lost count of the amount of times that we were on that call. We'd start at 7 p.m. and it would be like 3 a.m. and we'd still all be there.
Wow.
And we'd all be there together and everyone was in the same boat. And I think out of the 12 people that were originally on there, 7 of them, it had also started as an adult. And that was the first time since the whole thing had started that I genuinely felt like somebody understood, because I'm that constant, like, for example, I was like, that like almost feels like a vibration behind your eye. And so many of them were like, oh yeah, I hate that feeling. And I thought somebody else gets it. Do you know what I mean? Because I'd felt so lonely, because you can say to someone, I've got a headache, and they've had a headache before.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? But I didn't know anyone else with Tourette's. I didn't know anyone else that had happened to as an adult. It's so surprisingly like rare despite despite the numbers. But finally somebody got it, and we spent hours on these like calls, and it just, I don't know, it just gave me like that confident boost. I was still nothing like I used to be, but it was a big part of that change into like accepting it.
Yeah.
And I remember one guy, Ashley, on the call, he'll 100% listen to this as well. I was really upset one day, and he was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I just want to turn it off sometimes." And he just said to me so bluntly, he was like, "Well, get a fucking grip, because you can't." He was like, "It's shit." He was like, "But that's it." He was like, "It doesn't," yeah. He was like, it doesn't turn off. You don't get a day off. He was like, "This is just, it is what it is." He was like, "And it's now part of you." He was like, "And you have to deal with it." And I've also met a lot of younger people with Tourette's, and then a few of them have taken their life along like the way the last few years, and it purely stems down to just being unable to accept it, and you're fighting against it, and it is next to impossible, because you won't win fighting against it because you can't turn it off. And I know, because I've been there. Do you know what I mean?
How do you describe it to people? Do people ask you about it?
Most vocal ones, I don't know they're going to happen. I know what it's going to be about sometimes, because I know it will be a trigger, and it's always the most offensive thing I can think of at the time, whether it's something racist or someone's in a wheelchair. I know something like that is going to trigger. I'll try my best to suppress it. Other times, whenever the vocal ones come out, it's like I'm hearing it for the first time. Like there's no mental process, which is why I laugh occasionally when I tick something, because it makes me chuckle, because I haven't thought it. And I think if I heard someone else say it, I'd be like, "That's funny." Do you know what I mean?
But this is the involuntary action aspect of it, right?
And other times you can feel that you're going to tick something. Like I said, like I know what the triggers would be. Fuck off, bitch. It almost feels like that sensation just before you sneeze. Like, do you know what I mean? Like it's almost too late to like, and sometimes you can catch it. Or if you held your eyes open, eventually you feel that deep need to blink. I spend a lot of time like suppressing them, or I used to, not so much anymore, like not at work or anything. Mainly in the street if I'm on my own. Like I do my best, because...
How safe do you feel?
Not really. Because it's always the most offensive thing. Like I've kind of lucked out where I know people who just tick, Go Chloe just ticks sunshine, rainbows, butterflies, like things like this constantly. And I'm literally like, bollocks, twat, all of this. Do you know what I mean? And it's always like as I'm looking at someone, and it's like when they make eye contact with me, that's when my tics will be like perfect timing. Do you know what I mean? So someone looks at me and I'm like, twat, in the street. When someone else is there, it's fine to explain, fuck off. But when it's just me, sometimes if I know it's been bad, like if I've said like a racial slur as a tic, trying to get that explanation out, the stammer starts, more tics start, and I'm like, then feel like I'm drowning. I hate just like, say walking along the street, buses, tube, like anything like that. Like I still hate doing it.
Let's talk about Fred for a second.
Yes.
Fred's your son. How do you find your Tourette's in being a dad?
So I get questioned on this a lot. Fred was a baby when I brought him home. He had just turned 1, so it was 3 days after his first birthday. And he didn't crawl by that point, and he was just a chubby baby. And so you'd carry him around, and that was fine. And people were like, "What if you tick and drop him?" And I in my head, I was like, "Shit, I hadn't really considered that. Now, what if I tick and drop him?" On the bright side, Fred's an incredibly big baby, so I thought maybe it's a bit more durable than most.
It bounce.
Yeah. I wouldn't take unnecessary risks. And like, they're like, when people are like, "Oh, it's so dangerous if you're cooking around a child." And I think, do you honestly think, as someone with Tourette's, I'm going to pick up a baby in one hand, a fucking kitchen knife in the other, and stand over a stove? Like, I'm not thick. Do you know what I mean?
No one should be doing that. Do you know what I mean?
People were always so concerned that I would drop him. I don't know, I suppose on some level it almost convinced me that I thought, shit, what if you do drop him?
Yeah.
Or what if your arm tick and you hit him by mistake? Or like my head will jolt occasionally with a tick, and I'm like, what if you headbutt him? And I'm like, everything was like running through my brain. And then I joined the Tourette's Action group, and I was like, who's a parent? Because I need to talk to you. And they're like, honestly, it's fine. And they're like, and if you tick and smack them, they were like, just apologize. Like, it's a tic. Like, the kids know, like, they can detect the tone difference between what you're saying and what's a tic. And I think the most annoying ones were the vocal tics, because trying to get a toddler to sleep, and as soon as you lie them down and then ticking and shouting,
Sorry for laughing, but
shouting boo or wake up. Oh my God, I could have just smashed my head into the wall at the time. Like, finally get them to sleep, and then instantly I'm like ticking, I'm like, wake up, and I'm like, fuck. But Fred knows the difference between fuck off, how I talk, and what the tics are. He knows we don't repeat the tic words. He's learned recently that if he whistles in a certain way, and he can whistle, he's 2.5, and I didn't think kids could whistle, but apparently they can. He knows if he whistles in a certain way, it will trigger a whistling tic for me.
Wow.
So he'll do it, and sometimes I'll be in the other room and he'll call me, and then I'll hear the whistle, and then instantly, like, it will tic response. Because when you're around people with Tourette's and they tic as well, for some reason it bounces off each other and it makes it worse. It has the same impact when he does that, and I have no idea why. But he finds
amazing.
He finds it hysterical.
And so Fred is adopted.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about that adoption process and how you found that.
The adoption process, so the whole thing in total was 2.5 years. Tourette's wise, adoption process, I wish everyone treated me like they did. Like, they had questions, but it was always asked in the most respectful way. And the thing they took from it most was all of the positives, like the resilience from my story, the self-acceptance and things like this. And they're like, oh yeah, that's what we want to instill in our adopted children. So to them, it was a massive positive. And no matter what group I met, whether it was our social worker, Fred's social team, the judging panel, like, they all were on exactly the same page.
That's so amazing to hear.
And I remember being absolutely stunned by it, because we wanted to adopt for a while. And I remember having the conversation with George saying, we won't be able to now. Like, they're so careful about who they give a child to, obviously, that fuck off. They're not going to give a child to someone who's swearing every 3 minutes, and there's a risk of them ticking and punching a kid in the face. Do you know what I mean? Eventually, I got talked around to it, and yeah, it was like the biggest positive, and it was like such an odd feeling that it was like suddenly the thing that I'd carried around for so long with, like, there was shame and every difficulty was related to us. If anything, it was like a plus. And I genuinely think a lot of people could learn from the way they did things.
What I love is you've adopted a son.
Yeah.
You've started a business.
I did.
That is doing really, really well.
Yeah.
That is a neurodivergent-led team.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. You bought a house. You like this turnaround.
It's been insane. Like, I started my company, like, because I thought, like, nobody would hire me. And this was after I'd kind of got the diagnosis and sort of come out of this, like, the darkest place I'd been. And I thought, well, if no one's gonna fucking hire me, I'll just do it myself. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'll fix it for myself. And I did. Like, I started working as a virtual assistant, and yeah, it's spiraled since then. And now there's, like, we have, like, an office in Cheltenham, like a huge office, and it's bright pink to match our brand. It is exactly how I would want an office I worked in to look. And I have a team of 10. We have, like, a full client list. We have a wait list, and it's like a mainly neurodivergent team, but we also mainly support neurodivergent clients.
How do you find running that from a, like, let's have an ND led kind of team and ND clients, and how do you find that?
It's an experience.
Yeah.
So our clients as well range from dyslexia, dyspraxia, and then we have ADHD, autism, and it doesn't run the same as any other virtual PA agency, and we wouldn't want it to. We are so used to the most odd, random requests, and it's the same with my team. Like, my team think about things in such a different way to any other team I've worked with before. So on our team, we have autism, dyspraxia, OCD, ADHD, but managing that team it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it's never dull.
Never.
What change have you seen with regard to, like, society and the public, you know, in the last 5 years where Tourette's is concerned? There's
been a few documentaries, I think, out that haven't hit the mark, which has definitely had an impact. Everyone in the Tourette's community knew about the Scarlett Moffat documentary, where she told people I don't know how it ever got released, you could catch Tourette's, essentially. And I'm still battling the same preconceptions from, like, a video of Tourette's, like a documentary in the 80s that were like, oh, it's just swearing. Do you know what I mean? Like only 10 to 15% of people with Tourette's swear. And there are so many weird preconceived ideas. Like people don't know that it comes with like the mental tics or tic seizures or like comorbid conditions like autism and stuff like that, because as I've been told by other producers, like that just doesn't make good TV. They want to see the swear and they want to get the laughs. So I think thanks to social media, there's definitely a better understanding of Tourette's and the reality of it. But I think TV and things like that need to catch up.
Tell me about mental tics, Luke.
So mental tics are essentially, it's classed as like a complex tic. It is equal in some areas to intrusive thoughts, as in OCD. So you'll just have a random thought of like, you know, it's always the example for things like walking past a kid in the street and then in your head, you'll almost see it like a film, like just kick that kid in the road. Like, do you know what I mean? And it's something like that that's so unhinged. And you think you almost have to remind yourself like that's not what I'm actually thinking. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not actually that crazy. Or it's like a replay of things that you don't want to see, like, or don't want to hear. But also there's a type of tic, and I get them very, very rarely, but I know people who get them frequently and it must drive them insane. It will trigger the same, much like deja vu triggers the sensation in your brain, like you're remembering something. This will trigger the same sensation in your brain as if you're hearing something. Ooh. So it sends the same signals and will then give you a thought that you think you're hearing, which I find absolutely wild. With the person I know with these frequently, she'll jump so often because to her it feels like someone's whispered in her ear. Oof. But it's just her brain sending those signals as if someone would whisper. Oof. Do you know what I mean? So, and you can hear things like the one I get is like, there used to be right, but by my childhood house was a house with a home alarm, and the amount of times that alarm would just go off randomly. And I have a mental tic that is almost just a section, like a snippet of that. And I hear that and I'll occasionally like just have to catch myself, like, you don't need to look around, like it's not around, it's just in your head. Or
but you're hearing it.
Yeah, and nobody else can hear it, there's no sound, but to you, it's triggered the same process in your brain as if you've heard it, which is...
That's wild.
It's just wild. And those, I think, are all in the category of mental tic.
A mental tic, yeah.
Yeah.
So what I see you doing is being such a great role model and basically representing. And from listening to you talk, you didn't see any of that kind of representation when you were growing up. Yeah, I just wonder when you talk to that younger generation and people ask your advice, what do you say?
It's so difficult because what you want to say is almost like that it'll get better, that things will be fine. But as of now, there's no cure with Tourette's. There's no specific medication for Tourette's, like no dedicated medication for it. Any medication thing is just trial and error. There's kind of no way out of it. So I try and like frame it in the most positive way of it being, it's just part of who they are. Like everybody has their own thing essentially. And like, this is ours. And I was like, it is so annoying, but I kind of get them to the point where they will grow to love it. Like now, if I had a button here and you were like, if you press this, you'll get rid of Tourette's, like I wouldn't press it. Like it has given me so much back. Like I always thought my goal was to get back to how I used to be. But I almost feel like Tourette's has pushed me in a different direction and made like a better version. And I am so much happier. Like even before Tourette's and before the symptoms started, I was like happy, I was confident, but I still, for example, hated the way I looked and stuff like that. Like I still had those standard things that people, now like I don't give a shit. And there is still hurdles that I need to overcome and I'll get there. But I'm like honest with them about it. I still have days where it's shit. Like, and there's no getting around it. Like everyone has shitty days, like whether you've got Tourette's or not. But yeah, it's like, it's just encouraging that self-acceptance and that it is letting them know that it's part of them and it's not something to be ashamed of. And Tourette's, as much as it makes you want to hide, it's the reason people will stare at you. Do you know what I mean? And I just kind of have to like almost like steal them for that. And like, I think there is so much to be said for that self-acceptance of Tourette's, because like without it, everything is so much worse.
Yeah, I go back to what you said about not fighting it because you're not going to win.
Yeah.
And that then is a process, isn't it, of learning to accept that
Yeah.
it's part of you and it's about working with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have Tourette's, but being autistic and ADHD has been a process for me of learning to work with my brain, not against it.
Yeah.
And that's part of kind of going, oh, I've got some names for my brain. Okay. But I got a little bit more understanding and a bit of an explanation.
Yeah.
Now I can sort of go, oh, right. Okay. This makes sense. And that doesn't make sense. And maybe I'm not quite as hard on myself.
I think it's that acceptance as well that you are different. Do you know what I mean? You're different and things aren't going to be the same for you or work the same as they do for the majority of people. And that's fine. I think we're so pushed into being alienated for being slightly different that we kind of do it to ourselves. And once you do accept it, like everything just becomes so much easier. And I'm not saying it's an easy process. Like I'm sure you understand as well, whenever you get a diagnosed something like autism, like you think, your brain just instantly goes to everything you've seen on like TV about it, like all those films and stuff. And you think, oh, is that how people are going to see me? When in reality, like, it's not the case. Do you know what I mean? You're still exactly the same person you were. And yeah, I think self-acceptance is the biggest thing with any neurodivergent condition, let alone Tourette's.
But there's a lot of work to do, isn't there? I've got the image of you that's on your Instagram looking like you've been in a fight with yourself. Is pretty shocking to kind of then read about all of the injuries that you've had. Like, it's not a joke.
No, it's rough, and it can be so rough
physically.
But, and I'm like now, like for example, like now my head's only staying still because I've had like Botox jabs in the back of my neck to keep it still. Otherwise I can't keep my head still. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's knackering, it's tiring, it's effort, but I think I'm almost used to it. Like I'm so far away from my old life that I don't have that comparison anymore. Like I can't remember what it was like to not have tics, and now I can't think like, oh
yeah, you've done that grieving.
Like, and I can't remember anymore. So now I'm just like, this is it, and now I'll just do things to make it easier. But yeah, like physically it's like it's rough as well. And people have to be like prepared for that side of things. And I think this is what I explain to parents a lot. Like it's hard, like it's a workout essentially.
I think your story's incredibly powerful and very inspiring. So I think this idea of, well, I'm just going to start a company because that gives me the opportunity to create an environment in which I can thrive. I want for more people in the UK who are like, I don't really fit in this box, or I don't really get on well in that corporate structure. And I want to start something of my own. I think it is the best for neurodivergent people. I think it's to literally like create the ways of working and the environment and the team in which you thrive best. Like it's so brilliant.
And it's all been through trial and error as well. I was also in that position as well. I had nothing to lose. I'd lost everything already. So I thought, I can't make it any worse. And it gave me the opportunity to just kind of do it for everyone else as well. Yeah, it's definitely worked out better than I could have thought.
So my last question is, who would you like to give a green badge to?
So I haven't spoke about her much today, but she has been such a huge part of my story. But Leah Turner. Leah was my very first virtual personal assistant client and has stayed with me like ever since. But she is the first person that also convinced me to talk about Tourette's openly. So from my very first like video that I posted about Tourette's, like Leah was the driving force behind that. And I think that had such a like huge impact on like my self-acceptance, like finding this wider support network of all these people who are genuinely piss off interested in the condition. And she's kind of helped me get to that point where I showed myself instead of just the tics. Do you know what I mean? Because I was always moaning to her. I was like, people see the tics before me kind of thing. And she was like, but you're holding back. She was like, so put yourself before the tics. And it's something so simple. And I was like, she's right.
Whoa, I need to like take that for a little walk in my brain. That piece of, because I imagine Yeah, it can be. Well, you just see me tick before you see me talk, and
Yep.
that's you make up your mind based on
Instantly.
that. Thank you, Leah Turner. And thanks, Luke, for coming on.
Thank you very much.
We've had such a great response to the podcast, and so many of you have been in touch asking what you can do to help. It's really simple. Just follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That way we can reach more people, and that way we can celebrate these great minds that think differently.